Violet Chen tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she reviewed the medication chart outside room 412 at Boston Memorial Hospital. The pediatric wing had been her home for 5 years, but tonight she found herself on the cardiac floor, picking up an extra shift to help cover the mounting bills that seemed to multiply every week. Her younger sister Lily needed another round of experimental treatment, and insurance had denied the claim. Again. The door to the private suite stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Violet knocked gently before entering, her practiced smile already in place. Inside, Harrison Whitmore sat propped against pillows, his once robust frame now frail beneath the hospital gown. Despite his weakened state, his dark eyes held a sharpness that spoke of decades building one of Boston's most successful technology firms. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore." Violet checked the monitors beside his bed, noting his heart rate and oxygen levels. "How are you feeling today?" Harrison managed a weak smile. "Better now that you are here, my dear. You have a calming presence. Most of the staff rush in and out like they are running a marathon." Violet adjusted his foredrip with practiced efficiency. "We get busy sometimes, but you deserve proper care." She had been assigned to Harrison for 2 weeks now, ever since the hospital needed someone with her particular blend of patience and skill to manage his complex case. In that short time, they had developed an easy rapport. Harrison reminded her of her own grandfather, who had passed away 3 years earlier. "Sit for a moment, please." Harrison gestured to the chair beside his bed. "I need to discuss something important with you." Violet hesitated, glancing at the door. "Mr. Whitmore, I really should check on my other patients. This will only take a few minutes." His tone carried an urgency that made Violet pause. She pulled the chair closer and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. Harrison studied her face for a long moment before speaking. "How much do you know about my family?" Violet considered the question carefully. "I know you built Whitmore Technologies from nothing. Your son Dominic runs it now. You mentioned him a few times during our conversations." "Yes, Dominic." Harrison's expression grew complicated, mixing pride with something that looked like regret. "He is brilliant, driven, absolutely dedicated to the company. But he is also the loneliest person I know." The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting golden patterns across the white sheets. Outside, the sounds of Boston traffic hummed distantly, a reminder of the world continuing beyond these walls. "I made a terrible mistake years ago." Harrison's voice grew softer. "When I created my will, I included a clause requiring Dominic to be married before he could inherit full control of the company. I thought it would motivate him to build a life beyond work, to find someone who could help him see there is more to life than quarterly earnings reports." Violet listened quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. Instead, he simply ignored the requirement. Harrison continued. "He is 34 years old and has never been in a serious relationship. He dates occasionally, but treats every woman like a potential business merger. Always calculating, never connecting." The old man paused to catch his breath. Violet reached for the water cup on the bedside table, helping him take a small sip. His hand trembled as he pushed it away. "Dr. Brennan tells me I have perhaps a month left." Harrison stated the fact calmly, but Violet saw the fear flickering behind his brave facade. "A month to make amends for my mistakes, to try and give my son one last chance at happiness." Violet felt her chest tighten with sympathy. "Mr. Whitmore, I am sure Dominic knows you love him. Love is not enough when you are dead." Harrison fixed her with an intense stare. "Which is why I need to ask you something that will sound completely insane. Something that may offend you, and I will understand completely if you refuse." The air in the room seemed to shift, becoming heavy with anticipation. Violet found herself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by the urgency in his voice. "Would you consider marrying my son?" The words hung in the air between them. Violet sat back sharply, her eyes widening in shock. She opened her mouth but no sound came out. Her mind raced, trying to process what she had just heard. "Before you say no, please let me explain." Harrison spoke quickly, as if afraid she would flee the room. "It would be temporary, just 6 months to fulfill the will requirement. I would compensate you generously. $200,000. Half upon marriage, half when the arrangement ends." Violet stood abruptly, walking to the window. Her reflection stared back at her, a young woman in scrubs who suddenly felt completely out of her depth. $200,000. The number echoed in her mind. That was more than enough to save Lily, to pay for all the treatments her sister needed. "Mr. Whitmore, I do not even know your son." Violet turned back to face him, her voice shaking slightly. "Marriage, even a temporary one, that is incredibly complicated. I know what I am asking is unusual." Harrison's eyes pleaded with her. "But I have watched you these past 2 weeks, Violet. You are kind, genuine, strong in ways that have nothing to do with physical strength. You are exactly the kind of person who could reach my son, if given the chance." Violet wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm room. "This is crazy. People do not just marry strangers for money. They do when they are desperate." Harrison said gently. "And I think you are desperate, Violet. I hear you on the phone during your breaks, talking to someone about medical bills, about experimental treatments that insurance will not cover. I may be dying, but I am not blind." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. Her sister Lily, beautiful and vibrant despite the cancer trying to steal her life away. Lily, who was only 22 and should have her whole future ahead of her. The weight of that responsibility settled on Violet's shoulders like a physical burden. "I need time to think about this," Violet managed to say. "This is not something I can decide right now." "Of course." Harrison nodded, though his expression showed relief that she had not immediately refused. "But please think quickly. Time is a luxury I no longer have." Violet left the room in a daze, her mind spinning with impossible possibilities. She went through the motions of her shift mechanically, checking vitals and dispensing medications while her thoughts churned. That evening, she sat beside Lily's bed at the oncology center across town, watching her sister sleep. The chemotherapy had stolen Lily's thick black hair, leaving her looking fragile and pale. But even in sleep, Lily's face held a determination that had carried her through so much already. Violet held her sister's thin hand, feeling the delicate bones beneath skin that seemed almost translucent. She thought about Harrison's offer, about the money that could save Lily's life. She thought about marrying a man she had never met, about the bizarre arrangement that felt both wrong and somehow necessary. 2 days later, Violet returned to room 412 with her decision made. But this time, she was not alone. Harrison had summoned his son, and Violet finally met Dominic Whitmore face to face. He stood by the window, tall and imposing in a navy suit that probably cost more than Violet earned in 2 months. Dark hair, steel gray eyes, and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He radiated power and control, assessing Violet with the same cold calculation she imagined he used in boardrooms. "This is your solution, father?" Dominic's voice was deep, edged with barely controlled fury. "You want me to marry a complete stranger to claim my inheritance?" Violet lifted her chin, meeting his dismissive gaze with quiet strength. "And you, Mr. Whitmore, are willing to marry a stranger to keep your company? Let us not pretend either of us is doing this for noble reasons." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or maybe respect. It vanished quickly behind his professional mask. 6 months. Dominic stated flatly. Purely contractual. Separate living arrangements. Minimal public interaction. Agreed. Violet replied, her heart pounding. Harrison smiled from his bed, looking more peaceful than he had in weeks. "Thank you both. You are giving a dying man one final hope. Dominic's jaw clenched. He turned and walked out without another word, leaving Violet standing there, wondering what she had just committed herself to. In 3 weeks, she would become Mrs. Dominic Whitmore, at least on paper. The thought terrified her, but when she remembered Lily's face, she knew she would walk through fire if it meant her sister survived. The wedding took place on a gray Thursday morning at Boston City Hall. Violet wore a pale blue dress borrowed from her best friend Rachel, who had insisted on being there as her witness. Dominic arrived in a charcoal suit, accompanied by his attorney, a stern-faced woman named Patricia Monroe who carried a briefcase full of legal documents. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Dominic's kiss was brief and cold, barely a touch of lips that felt more like sealing a business deal than beginning a marriage. Violet signed the papers with hands that trembled slightly, officially becoming Mrs. Whitmore. Rachel squeezed her shoulder supportively, whispering encouragement, but Violet felt numb. This was nothing like the wedding she had dreamed about as a girl, when she imagined walking down an aisle towards someone who loved her, surrounded by family and friends celebrating their future together. Instead, she stood in a sterile government building, bound to a stranger through legal contracts rather than love. The first payment of $100,000 appeared in her account that afternoon. Violet immediately transferred most of it to the oncology center, securing Lily's next round of treatments. When her sister called that evening, crying with relief and gratitude, Violet knew she had made the right choice, regardless of how strange the circumstances felt. Moving into Dominic's penthouse 3 days later was surreal. The apartment occupied 2 floors of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. Everything was modern and expensive, decorated in shades of charcoal and cream with minimal warmth. Artwork that probably cost thousands hung on walls, but there were no photographs, no personal touches that revealed anything about the man who lived there. It looked like a luxury hotel suite rather than a home. Dominic gave her a brief tour, his manner efficient and distant. Your bedroom is on the 2nd floor, east wing. He opened a door to reveal a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the harbor. The attached bathroom was larger than Violet's entire previous apartment, all marble and chrome with a soaking tub that looked ridiculously indulgent. My room is on the opposite end. Dominic continued, already moving down the hallway. There is a home office you can use, a gym on the lower level, and the kitchen is fully stocked. Mrs. Ross, my housekeeper, comes 4 days a week. She prepared your room and knows about our arrangement. Violet followed him through the expansive space, feeling overwhelmed. Thank you. This is very generous. Dominic stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. This is not generosity, Mrs. Whitmore. This is a contract. We both have our reasons for this arrangement. Let us maintain appropriate boundaries and make these 6 months as painless as possible. The words stung more than Violet expected. She had no right to feel hurt since this was exactly what she had agreed to, but something about his coldness made her feel small and foolish. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. Dominic. He corrected, his tone softening slightly. If we are going to convince anyone this marriage is real, you should probably use my first name. Then you should call me Violet. He nodded once, then checked his watch. I have meetings until late tonight. Help yourself to anything you need. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing through the vast apartment before the elevator doors closed behind him. Violet stood alone in the enormous living room, surrounded by luxury that felt cold and impersonal. She unpacked her 2 suitcases in the beautiful bedroom, hanging her modest wardrobe in a closet designed for 10 times as many clothes. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had gotten herself into. The first 2 weeks established a pattern of careful avoidance. Dominic left for work before dawn and returned long after Violet had gone to bed. They communicated through brief text messages about practical matters. Violet continued her shifts at Boston Memorial, grateful for the normalcy of her work. The hospital felt real in a way the penthouse did not, grounding her in a life she understood. She visited Lily every evening after work, sitting beside her sister during chemotherapy sessions, reading aloud from novels they both loved, holding her hand through the nausea and exhaustion. Lily looked stronger already, the new treatment giving her color and energy she had not had in months. Every time Violet saw improvement, she reminded herself why she had made this choice. Mrs. Ross, the housekeeper, turned out to be a warm woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She started leaving notes for Violet about Dominic's preferences and schedules, small details that painted a picture of a man who lived for his work. He drinks black coffee, always. He hates clutter. He has nightmares sometimes but will never admit it. The notes felt like small gifts, glimpses into a person Violet was supposed to be married to but barely knew. The first real interaction came on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks into their arrangement. Violet woke early and went downstairs to make breakfast, surprised to find Dominic already in the kitchen. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater instead of his usual suits, looking younger and somehow more approachable. He stood at the counter with his laptop open, scrolling through what appeared to be financial reports while drinking coffee. "Good morning," Violet said hesitantly, not wanting to disturb him. Dominic looked up, seeming equally surprised to see her. "Morning." He paused, then added, "I did not realize you would be up this early on your day off." "I am used to early shifts." Violet moved to the coffee maker, pouring herself a cup. "Plus, I want to visit Lily before she gets too tired from her medication." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. "How is your sister doing?" The question caught Violet off guard. It was the first personal inquiry he had made since their wedding. "Better. The new treatment is working. She has more energy, and the doctors are optimistic." "That is good," Dominic said quietly. "I am glad the arrangement is helping her." Violet studied him, noticing the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "When was the last time you took a day off?" He looked at her like she had asked him to explain quantum physics. "I do not take days off. The company requires constant attention. Everyone needs rest, Dominic. Even brilliant CEOs." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone so quickly Violet almost missed it. "Are you diagnosing me, Nurse Whitmore?" "Maybe I am." Violet surprised herself with her boldness. "You look exhausted." Before Dominic could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened back into its usual mask. "I have a conference call in 10 minutes. He closed his laptop and headed toward his office, then paused at the doorway. "Violet." "Yes?" "Thank you for asking about my rest. No one usually bothers." He disappeared into his office before she could respond, leaving Violet standing in the kitchen, holding her coffee and wondering if she had just glimpsed something real beneath his carefully maintained armor. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Dominic's assistant called to inform Violet about a charity gala that Friday evening. As Dominic's wife, her attendance was expected. Several major investors would be there, people who needed to believe the marriage was genuine for the inheritance clause to hold up under scrutiny. "I do not have anything appropriate to wear to something like that," Violet protested when Dominic mentioned it that evening. They were both in the kitchen, a rare moment of overlap in their schedules. "Patricia already arranged for a stylist to come tomorrow," Dominic said without looking up from his tablet. "She will bring options. Choose whatever you like. The company will cover the expense." Violet bristled at his dismissive tone. "I am not a doll you can dress up for your business events." Dominic finally looked at her, his gray eyes sharp. "No, you are my wife, temporarily contracted to fulfill a requirement of my father's will. Part of that contract includes presenting a believable marriage to certain parties. This gala is one of those occasions." His words were true but felt harsh. Violet set down her water glass carefully, fighting the urge to throw it at his arrogant face. Fine. I will play my part. But do not expect me to enjoy it. I never expect anyone to enjoy business obligations. Dominic replied coolly. That is why they are called obligations. The stylist arrived the next afternoon with racks of designer gowns. Violet felt overwhelmed by the choices, eventually selecting a deep emerald dress that the stylist insisted brought out her eyes. The woman also arranged for hair and makeup artists to come Friday evening, transforming the whole event into an elaborate production. Friday arrived too quickly. Violet stood in front of her bedroom mirror, barely recognizing herself. The emerald gown hugged her figure elegantly, her dark hair swept up in a sophisticated style, makeup highlighting features she usually kept bare. She looked like she belonged in Dominic's world, at least superficially. When she descended the stairs, she found Dominic waiting in the foyer, devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo. For just a moment, when his eyes met hers, she saw something flicker in their gray depths. Surprise, maybe appreciation. It vanished quickly, but it had been there. You look presentable, he said, which Violet suspected was high praise coming from him. You look tolerable yourself, she replied, earning another ghost of a smile. The gala was held at a historic hotel downtown, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Dominic placed his hand on the small of her back as they entered, a gesture that looked natural but felt electric to Violet. She reminded herself it was all performance, that nothing about this was real. They moved through the crowd, Dominic introducing her to investors and business partners. Violet smiled and made polite conversation, playing the role of devoted wife while feeling like a fraud. She noticed how people looked at them, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed skepticism. The tech world apparently knew about Dominic's bachelor reputation, and her sudden appearance raised questions. Midway through the evening, a woman approached them. She was stunning, probably in her early 30s, wearing a red dress that cost more than most cars. Her smile was predatory as she focused on Dominic. Dominic Whitmore, married, the woman said, her tone dripping with disbelief. I never thought I would see the day. You must be very special. She turned to Violet with an assessing look. Dominic's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Violet's waist. Violet, this is Vanessa Hartford. She runs Hartford Investments. Vanessa, my wife Violet. Charmed. Vanessa's eyes moved between them, clearly searching for cracks in their facade. How did you two meet? It all happened so quickly. Violet felt Dominic tense beside her, but before he could speak, she answered smoothly. I was his father's nurse. We met at the hospital and connected over our conversations about Harrison. How romantic. Vanessa's tone suggested she found it anything but. And the timing, just before Harrison's condition worsened. Convenient for the inheritance situation. Violet felt anger flash through her, hot and protective. She stepped slightly closer to Dominic, her voice firm. The timing was about love, not convenience. When you meet the right person, you do not waste time with lengthy engagements. You commit. Dominic looked down at her, and Violet saw genuine surprise in his eyes. His arm moved around her waist fully, drawing her against his side. Exactly. He told Vanessa, his tone brooking no argument. Now if you will excuse us, I promised my wife a dance. He led Violet to the dance floor, one hand settling on her waist, the other taking her hand in his. They moved together to the slow music, and Violet was acutely aware of everywhere their bodies touched. Thank you, Dominic said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. For defending us. You did not have to do that. She was being rude. Violet replied, her heart beating faster than the music warranted. Besides, I am your wife, even if it is just on paper. I will not let people disrespect that. Dominic pulled back slightly to look at her face, his expression intense and searching. "You are not what I expected, Violet Chen." "Whitmore," she corrected with a small smile. "Violet Whitmore, remember?" Something shifted between them in that moment, something neither of them had anticipated when they signed the contract. The performance was starting to feel less like acting and more like possibility. Dominic's eyes held hers for a long moment before he looked away, his jaw tightening as if he was fighting some internal battle. The song ended, and they separated, returning to their roles as polite strangers playing at marriage. But something had changed, a crack in the walls they had both built. As they drove home in silence that night, Violet wondered if Dominic felt it too, this dangerous shift from contract to something that felt dangerously close to real. The weeks following the gala brought subtle changes to their arrangement. Dominic started coming home earlier, often arriving while Violet was preparing dinner. He would stand in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie and asking about her day with what seemed like genuine interest. They began eating meals together occasionally, conversations moving beyond polite small talk to actual discussions about their lives, their fears, their dreams. Violet learned that Dominic had built his father's company into an empire through relentless dedication, working 18-hour days to prove himself worthy of the Whitmore name. He spoke little about his childhood, but she gathered it had been lonely, filled with boarding schools and nannies while Harrison focused on building his business. The will requirement was not just about control, Violet realized. It was Harrison's final attempt to give his son what he had failed to provide during his lifetime: connection and companionship. Dominic learned that Violet had raised Lily after their parents died in a car accident 7 years earlier. She had been 21, suddenly responsible for a grieving 15-year-old while finishing nursing school. Every choice she made revolved around keeping her sister safe, healthy, and happy. The weight of that responsibility had shaped her into someone strong but also guarded, afraid to want things for herself when Lily needed so much. One evening, Violet returned from the hospital to find Dominic in the living room, staring out at the harbor lights. Something about his posture spoke of defeat, of exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. "Bad day?" she asked softly, setting down her bag. "My father is declining rapidly," Dominic said without turning around. "Dr. Brennan called. He has maybe 2 weeks left, possibly less." Violet moved to stand beside him, her heart aching for the pain she heard beneath his controlled tone. "I am sorry, Dominic. I know this is hard." He finally looked at her, his gray eyes shadowed with grief he was trying desperately to contain. "I thought I had made peace with losing him. But now that it is actually happening, I realize I wasted so much time. All those years I spent building the company instead of building a relationship with him." Without thinking, Violet reached out and took his hand. Her fingers laced through his, a gesture of comfort that felt natural despite their complicated arrangement. "You still have time. Go see him tomorrow. Tell him the things you need to say." Dominic looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a movement that sent warmth spreading through Violet's chest. "Will you come with me?" he asked quietly. "I think he would like to see you. And honestly, I would like you there." "Of course." Violet squeezed his hand. "We will go together." They visited Harrison the next afternoon. The old man looked frailier than ever, his breathing labored even with oxygen support. But his eyes lit up when he saw them enter together, hand in hand. "There you are." Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. "My favorite couple." Dominic pulled a chair close to the bed, still holding Violet's hand. "Father, I need to tell you something." Harrison smiled knowingly. "You are falling in love with her." The words hung in the air. Violet felt her breath catch, her heart suddenly pounding. Dominic's hand tightened around hers, but he did not deny it. He did not confirm it either, instead changing the subject to talk about company matters and old memories. When they left an hour later, neither of them mentioned what Harrison had said. But something had shifted again, become more complicated. The lines they had drawn so carefully were blurring, and Violet was not sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. The following week brought an unexpected complication in the form of Dr. James Mitchell, a new attending physician at Boston Memorial. He was handsome in a classic way, with sandy hair and an easy smile that made patients comfortable. He took an immediate interest in Violet, often finding reasons to consult with her on cases, inviting her to lunch, complimenting her work. Violet appreciated his attention but made it clear she was married. James seemed undeterred, pointing out that her marriage was very new and that she never wore her wedding ring at work. Violet had kept the ring in her locker, afraid of damaging it during patient care, but his observation made her start wearing it on a chain around her neck. She mentioned James casually one evening while she and Dominic were having dinner. Just a passing comment about a new doctor at the hospital who had helped her with a difficult pediatric case. She did not think much of it until she noticed Dominic's expression darken, his jaw clenching in a way she had learned meant he was angry. "This Dr. Mitchell," Dominic said carefully. "Is he competent?" "Very." Violet replied, confused by his tone. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." Dominic returned his attention to his food, but the warmth that had been growing between them over recent weeks seemed to evaporate, replaced by icy distance. The next day, Violet arrived at work to find an enormous bouquet of roses at the nurse's station with her name on the card. Her colleagues teased her, assuming they were from her new husband. But when Violet opened the card, she found a note from James asking her to dinner. She threw the flowers away immediately, but not before several people saw them. Word apparently traveled, because that evening Dominic was waiting for her when she got home, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Received any interesting gifts today?" he asked, his tone sharp. Violet set down her bag slowly, realizing someone must have told him about the flowers. "If you are referring to the roses from Dr. Mitchell, I threw them away. I am not interested in him." "Are you not?" Dominic's eyes flashed with something fierce and possessive. "Because from what I hear, he has been very attentive to you. Lunches together, consultations that seem unnecessary, compliments about your appearance." Violet felt her own anger rising. "Have you been having someone spy on me at work?" "I have colleagues at the hospital. They mentioned seeing you with this doctor." Dominic moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "They thought I should know my wife was receiving romantic attention from another man. This is ridiculous." Violet stood her ground even as her heart raced. "We have a contract, Dominic. 6 months of marriage to fulfill your father's will. You do not get to be jealous about doctors who flirt with me at work. Do I not?" Dominic's voice dropped dangerously low. "You are my wife, Violet. Contract or not, you wear my ring. I wear your ring because of a legal agreement, not because of love." Violet shot back, even as the words felt increasingly untrue. "You made it very clear this was a business arrangement. You do not get to suddenly act like a possessive husband when someone else shows interest in me." "Maybe I was wrong," Dominic said, and suddenly he was right in front of her, close enough that she could see the storm of emotions in his gray eyes. "Maybe this stopped being just business weeks ago, and I have been too stubborn to admit it." Violet's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that the thought of that doctor touching you, taking you to dinner, making you smile, it makes me want to destroy things." Dominic's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I am saying that somewhere between the contract signing and now, you became more than a convenient solution to my inheritance problem." "Dominic," Violet whispered, torn between fear and hope. "I am saying I am falling in love with you, Violet. And it terrifies me because I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be the husband you deserve." "Then let me teach you," Violet said softly, her hand covering his where it rested against her face. "Let me show you that love is not another business deal to manage. It is messy and complicated and worth every risk." Dominic kissed her then, really kissed her for the first time since their perfunctory wedding ceremony. His lips moved against hers with desperate hunger, months of restrained desire finally breaking free. Violet melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, kissing him back with equal passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I do not deserve you," he murmured. "Stop deciding what you deserve and just accept what I am offering." Violet replied. "I am here, Dominic. I am not going anywhere." That night, they talked for hours, confessing feelings they had been trying to ignore, discussing how their fake marriage had transformed into something achingly real. Dominic admitted he had started falling for her during the gala, when she had defended their relationship with such fierce conviction. Violet confessed that she had been fighting her growing feelings for weeks, afraid of wanting something she thought she could never truly have. The next 2 weeks were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Dominic and Violet spent every possible moment together, their relationship shifting from contract to genuine partnership. But Harrison's condition continued to deteriorate, the cancer finally winning its cruel battle. Violet was with Dominic when Harrison passed away on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The old man had drifted in and out of consciousness, but in one of his lucid moments, he had looked at them sitting together by his bedside and smiled. "You found each other," he whispered. "That is all I wanted." "We did, Dad," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to make it happen." Harrison squeezed their joined hands weakly. "Love each other well. Do not make my mistakes." Those were his last words. He slipped away peacefully an hour later, Dominic holding one hand while Violet held the other. When it was over, Dominic wept against Violet's shoulder, grieving the father he had finally learned to truly know, but only in those final months. The funeral was massive, attended by hundreds of business associates, employees, and friends. Violet stood beside Dominic through all of it, providing silent support as he navigated his grief while handling the responsibilities of his father's death. Mrs. Ross proved invaluable, managing details and ensuring Dominic ate and slept despite his tendency to work through his pain. 3 weeks after Harrison's funeral, Patricia Monroe called them to her office for the reading of the will. The inheritance was complex, but the key clause was clear. Dominic would receive full control of Whitmore Technologies and the entirety of Harrison's estate, provided he remained married for a minimum of 6 months. They had fulfilled 3 months of the requirement. 3 more months, and Dominic would have everything he had worked for. 3 more months, and Violet would receive her final payment. 3 more months, and they would be free to end the contract. Except neither of them wanted to end it anymore. That evening, they sat on the penthouse balcony, watching the sun set over Boston Harbor. The autumn air was crisp, and Violet wrapped herself in one of Dominic's sweaters, breathing in his scent. "We need to talk about the contract," Dominic said quietly. Violet's heart clenched with fear. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Yes." Dominic turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "I am having second thoughts about the timeline, about the temporary nature of our arrangement, about everything we agreed to initially." "Oh." Violet's voice came out small, uncertain. Dominic took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "Violet Chen Whitmore, I do not want a 6-month contract marriage with you. I do not want separate bedrooms and minimal public interaction. I do not want any of the terms we originally agreed to." Tears pricked Violet's eyes, fear and hope warring in her chest. "Then what do you want?" "I want forever," Dominic said simply. "I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to take care of Lily as if she were my own sister. I want to build a real life with you, messy and complicated and absolutely real. I want to marry you again, properly this time, in front of everyone we love, with vows that mean everything." A sob escaped Violet's throat, joy flooding through her. "I want that too. I love you, Dominic." Not because of the contract or the money. I love you because you are brilliant and difficult and surprisingly tender when you let your walls down. Then marry me again. Dominic pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the dying sunlight. Not for 6 months. Not for an inheritance. Marry me because we choose each other, every single day. Yes. Violet laughed through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, replacing the contract band with something that symbolized choice and love and forever. When he kissed her, it tasted like promises and new beginnings. 6 months later, they stood in a small chapel surrounded by friends and family. Lily was there, healthy and vibrant, her cancer in remission thanks to the treatments that had saved her life. Rachel stood as maid of honor, crying happy tears. Mrs. Ross sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Even Patricia Monroe attended, looking suspiciously misty-eyed. This time, when Dominic kissed his bride, it was not perfunctory or businesslike. It was passionate and public and absolutely real, a promise sealed with love rather than legal obligation. As they walked back down the aisle together, Violet caught sight of a photograph of Harrison that Mrs. Ross had placed on a chair of honor. The old man seemed to be smiling at them, satisfied that his final manipulation had given his son the greatest gift of all. That evening, in the penthouse that had transformed from a sterile showroom into a warm home, Dominic held Violet close and whispered against her hair. "Thank you for agreeing to marry a stranger. Thank you for teaching me how to love." Violet smiled, her heart full. "Thank you for being jealous enough to realize what we had before it was too late." And in the end, what had started as a desperate arrangement born of necessity became the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, from dying wishes and impossible contracts, from fake marriages that become beautifully, wonderfully real. The end.